There is a kind of pain that does not announce itself. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt unloved, misunderstood, or treated differently by someone you expected to love you? If this story speaks to you in any way, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what this story makes you feel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because every week we bring you powerful stories that stay with you long after they end. It does not arrive with shouting, or broken things, or doors slammed so hard the frame cracks. It arrives in the quiet, in the way a woman's eyes move past a child, as if he is furniture. In the pause before she speaks to him, that is a fraction longer than it should be. In the way she laughs with everyone else in the room, freely and without thinking, and then the moment he walks in, something in her face closes. He was 7 the first time he noticed it. He would notice it for the rest of his childhood, and carry the noticing into the rest of his life. His name was Kelechi, and the question that followed him from the time he could form questions was not a hard one. It was simple. Children ask simple questions. Is she even my mother? He was 7 when he first stood in that doorway. His sister Adaeze was seated on a low stool, and their mother's hands were moving through her hair slowly, deliberately, with a kind of attention Kelechi had never seen her give to anything. Not to food, not to prayer, not to the small things that require patience. She was laughing at something Adaeze had said. A full laugh, the kind that makes a person's whole body soften. Kelechi watched from the doorway for a long time before he said anything. He was learning, even at 7, to calculate the room before he entered it. He walked in. Mama, can you do mine too? After Adaeze. The laughing stopped. Not slowly, all at once, like a candle blown out. She looked at him, and he would spend years trying to describe what that look was. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was something worse than both. It was the look of someone who has been reminded of something they were trying to forget. Go outside, Kelechi. 3 words. Flat as a road. He went outside. He sat on the front step and looked at the dust on his feet. The sound of his mother's laughter resumed from inside the room. For his sister, not for him. He asked the question for the first time, not out loud. Just in the quiet inside his chest, where children put the things they cannot say to adults. Is she even my mother? He did not have an answer. The village did not give him one either. But the village knew something. The market women knew. The kind of knowing that comes from watching a family from the outside for years. They would see Mama Ngozi walk past with her children, and they would see the geometry of it. Adaeze close to her left side, her son Emeka just behind, little Chisom holding the hem of her wrapper, and Kelechi, always Kelechi, 4 or 5 steps behind the rest, not running to catch up, just walking, as if he had already accepted the distance as the natural order of things. One woman once whispered to another over a basin of palm oil, "That woman treats that boy differently. You have seen it too. Don't tell me you haven't." The other woman sucked her teeth and looked away. It is not our business to enter another person's compound. And that was where it ended. Every time. It was never anyone's business. His siblings ate first. This was not a rule that was ever spoken. It was simply the way the table worked. Adaeze sat closest to their mother. Emeka got the largest portion without asking. Chisom was too young to know any different. And Kelechi waited. He learned to eat what remained. He learned not to complain about it. Complaining only made things worse. There was a rainy season when he was 9. A storm came so fast and so hard that the compound turned to mud in minutes. Mama Ngozi came to the door and called for her children to come inside. She called Adaeze's name. She called Emeka's name. She called Chisom's name. She did not call his. He stood in the rain and waited for her to remember. She did not remember. He found the narrow overhang by the outdoor kitchen and pressed himself against the wall and waited for the storm to pass. Alone, at 9 years old, in the rain, he did not cry. He had already learned that crying did not change anything. The worst days were school days. Not because school was hard. School was the one place that made sense. At school, effort produced results. You studied. You answered. You were seen. The teachers did not have a reason to look past him. The worst days were the ones where parents were invited. Prize giving, inter-house sports, end-of-term assembly. Every time, Kelechi told himself she would come. Every time, he sat on the bench and watched the gate. Other children's mothers arrived in wrappers and head ties, carrying small coolers of food for after. Fathers stood in clusters near the fence, arms folded, proud and loud. His bench stayed empty beside him. He was 10 when he won first position in his class for the second term in a row. The headmaster called his name, and he walked to the front of the assembly and collected his certificate. He held it with both hands, and he looked at the crowd of parents, and his eyes went immediately, automatically, to the space where she should have been standing. She was not there. He walked back to his bench, sat down, placed the certificate flat on his knees, and he looked at it for a long time, the way you look at something that should feel like more than it does. He stopped asking why at 12. He had asked it too many times by then, and the question had worn smooth from use, like a stone in a river. It no longer cut him the way it used to. It just sat there. By 15 he had stopped asking her anything at all. He would come home, eat what was left, do his work, sleep. He spoke to her only when necessary. He answered when she addressed him. He did not start conversations. Something in him had decided, if she would not give him an answer, he would stop needing one. He would bury the question. He would bury it so deep it would never find its way back. And he would replace it with something that could not be taken away from him. Ambition. He studied the way people pray when they are desperate, with everything they have. Without certainty it will work, but unable to stop. There was a particular corner of the school corridor, just past the last classroom on the left, where the security light was strongest. On nights when there was no power in the compound, which was most nights, Kelechi would take his textbooks there after dinner and sit on the concrete floor until his eyes burned. He would stay until the security man came at midnight and told him to go home. He would go home, and he would be back the following evening. Mornings he woke before the compound stirred, before his mother lit the fire for breakfast, before his siblings rubbed sleep from their eyes. He read with his face close to the page in the grey light before dawn, the way someone reads a letter they do not want anyone else to see. His teachers noticed. One of them, Mr. Obi, pulled him aside after class in his second year of secondary school. Kelechi, whatever is pushing you, don't let it stop. You have the kind of mind that only comes along once in a long while in a place like this. Don't waste it. Kelechi nodded and said nothing. He didn't tell Mr. Obi what was pushing him. He didn't have the words for it yet. He only knew that somewhere ahead of him, far enough away from this compound, and this woman, and this silence, there was a life that would make sense. And he was going to reach it if it killed him. The scholarship letter arrived on a Wednesday. A full federal scholarship to study business administration at the University of Lagos. The letter was addressed to the compound. The postman gave it to whoever answered the gate. Mamangozi signed for it. She put it on the table and said nothing. When Kelechi came home that evening and saw the envelope, he picked it up and read it standing in the doorway. His hands started to shake. He looked up. His mother was at the fire, stirring. Her back was to him. "Mama, I got a scholarship. Full scholarship. To Unilag." She stirred, said nothing for a long moment. Then, without turning around, "Pack your things properly before you go." That was all. Pack your things properly before you go. Not congratulations, not well done, not I knew you could. He went to his room. He sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the scholarship letter for a long time. He looked around the small room that had watched him grow up. The cracked walls, the narrow bed, the tiny window that looked out over the compound. He had dreamed of leaving this place for as long as he could remember. Yet when the day finally came, freedom did not feel the way he had imagined. It felt heavy. He had spent years believing that if he studied hard enough, if he succeeded enough, if he became someone worth celebrating, One day, his mother would finally look at him, the way she looked at everyone else. The scholarship letter should have been that day. It wasn't. For the first time, he stopped waiting, and then, very quietly, he folded it and put it in his shirt pocket, close to his chest, and he smiled. Not for her, for himself, for the boy who had sat alone in the rain, for the boy whose name she never called, for the boy who had held a first position certificate with nobody beside him. He smiled, and he let himself feel it. He left 3 weeks later, his things in a single bag. Everything he owned fit in one bag, and that had never bothered him before, but it bothered him that morning. He picked it up and carried it out of the compound without ceremony. At the gate, he stopped and turned around, not because he wanted to, because something in him needed to see it one more time. The compound, the cracked steps, the outdoor kitchen, the step where he had sat in the rain. Mama Ngozi was standing in the doorway, arms at her sides, face neutral. She was watching him go the way you watch something you are not sure you are allowed to feel anything about. He held her gaze for 3 seconds, then he turned and walked away. He did not look back again. Can we pause here for a moment? If you've made it this far, I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think Kelechi was right to walk away without looking back? Or do you believe he should have tried to understand his mother sooner? Share your opinion in the comments. If you're enjoying stories like this, please take a second to like the video and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing these unforgettable stories to life. The city swallowed him whole, and he let it. University was the first place in his life where the rules were the same for everyone. You showed up, you worked, you were measured. Nobody looked at you with that particular look. Nobody reminded you with their silence that your existence was an inconvenience. He threw himself into it. He graduated with a first class, got a job, saved, started a company, failed once, started again. And then something shifted, the way it sometimes does when hunger and intelligence and refusal to stop combine in one person at the right moment. The company grew. Then it grew some more. Nadi Logistics was in 4 states by the time he was 35, 6 states by 38, 300 employees, a house in Ikoyi, a car that cost more than his entire childhood village had ever collectively owned, his photograph in a business magazine, shot in his office with the Lagos skyline behind him, looking like exactly the kind of man nobody from his village would have predicted he'd become. He gave to everyone. This was not generosity. Or it was generosity. But it was also a statement. He paid school fees for cousins he barely knew. He funded the drilling of a new well in the village. He sent money to uncles who had never been kind to him. He settled hospital bills for people who would not have done the same for him. He gave to everyone. Except her. When relatives called to say Mama Ngozi was ill, he listened. He said, "I heard," and he changed the subject. When a cousin sent a text message, "She is asking for you, Kelechi," he read it. He read it twice. Then he placed his phone face down on his desk and went back to the contract he was reviewing. When his auntie Chinwe called from the village crying, he let it ring, twice. Then he switched the phone to silent. An old classmate from the village, Ifeanyi, found his number somehow and called one evening. "Kelechi, I know it's not my place, but we grew up together. That woman is not well. She is old. Whatever happened between you and her, she is your mother." Kelechi was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in a voice that carried no bitterness and no heat, just the flat weight of a decision that had been made a long time ago, "I buried that woman in my heart years ago, Ifeanyi. I don't carry the dead twice." He ended the call. Everyone who heard him say things like that understood. They had seen how she raised him. The village remembered. So they said nothing further. They left him alone. And they thought, if it were me, I would do the same. 3 months after Ifeanyi's call, on a Tuesday morning, his personal assistant knocked on his office door and opened it slightly. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's your family. They say it's urgent." He excused himself from the board meeting and took the call in the corridor. His auntie Chinwe's voice was thick. "Kelechi, Your mother is gone, she passed this morning. He stood in the corridor and let the words settle. He waited to feel something. There was a stillness, but not the stillness of grief. The stillness of a room where something has been missing for so long that its absence has become the furniture. I'll send money for the arrangements. Make sure she is buried properly. He went back into the meeting. He picked up exactly where he had left off. He did not go home for the burial. He sent the money, but he stayed in Lagos. Work became his refuge. Meetings, contracts, flights, deadlines. It was easier to build companies than revisit childhood. He sent more than enough. He made sure she had a proper send-off. He did not attend. He told himself he felt nothing. And he almost believed it. Almost. She arrived 5 weeks after the burial, on a Thursday morning. 5 weeks passed. Life moved forward. At least, it looked like it did. Success has a remarkable way of hiding unresolved grief. From other people. Sometimes, even from ourselves. His security called up on the intercom. Sir, there is an old woman at the gate. She says she was a close friend of your mother's. She has something she says she was asked to deliver to you personally. Kelechi was at his desk. He looked at the intercom for a moment. He could have said, tell her to leave it at the gate. He could have said, I am not available. He could have said nothing and let the silence speak. He said, send her up. He did not know why. He told himself it was manners. An old woman had traveled. You do not leave an old woman at the gate. That was all it was. Mama Eze moved through his living room, the way very old people move through spaces that were not built for them. Not uncomfortable. Just belonging to a different era than the marble and chrome around her. She sat without being invited to sit. The kind of sitting that belongs to people who have long since stopped performing deference. She carried a wooden box on her lap. Small, dark with age, brass hinges worn to a dull gold. She held it the way you hold something that does not belong to you, but has been entrusted to you. Kelechi sat across from her. He did not offer tea. He waited. Your mother asked me to bring this to you. She gave it to me 3 years ago, and told me, when I am gone, take this to my son in Lagos. She said, if you bring it while I am still alive, he will not open it, so wait until I am gone. Kelechi looked at the box. What is inside it? Everything she could not say to your face. In 40 years, she never found a way to say it with her mouth, so she said it with her hands instead. Kelechi looked at her. Then he looked at the box. Then he reached forward and took it from her and set it on the glass table between them. He lifted the lid slowly. He didn't touch anything at first. He simply stared, as though the box itself had become a doorway into another life. Finally, he reached inside. School report cards, every single one. Primary 1, Term 1, he could see the date, all the way through to his final senior secondary result. Someone had collected them, every one, and stored them in a box, and kept them for over 2 decades. He picked one up. Primary 4, second term. His own handwriting filling in the name field at the top. His class position circled in pencil. First. The pencil circle around the number was faint, made gently, like the person who drew it did not want to damage the paper. He set it down. Crayon drawings. His own, from when he was small. He did not remember making most of them, but one he remembered. A drawing of a house with a sun above it, and 4 figures standing outside. He had drawn it in primary 2. The teacher had praised it. He had brought it home and left it on the table. He had assumed it was thrown away. It had not been thrown away. Hospital records from 3 separate childhood illnesses. One from when he was 6. He did not remember this one, but someone had taken him to a clinic, paid for the consultation, kept the paperwork, and stored it in a box, and then the letters. Then he saw them, bundle after bundle, carefully tied, waiting, as though someone had spent an entire lifetime hoping this moment would finally come. He lifted the first bundle and stared at it. They were tied with a piece of faded orange ribbon, dozens of them in the first bundle alone. He undid the ribbon, held one envelope, his name on the front, written in a large, careful hand, the letters slightly uneven, like someone who had taught themselves to write and never fully trusted their own penmanship. He opened it. He read the first line. He read the last line. I love you, my son. He put it down. He picked up another. Different date, different opening, same last line. I love you, my son. He put that one down too. He looked at the bundles. There were 4 of them. He counted the envelopes in one bundle. 31. Over 100 letters. All addressed to him. None of them ever sent. Why did she never send them? Mama Eze folded her hands. Because she did not know how to give you love and guilt at the same time. Every time she sat down to send one, she would think about what she had said to you that week, or what she had failed to do, and she could not bring herself to be a hypocrite. She said, how can I write I love you on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday refuse to call his name in front of the rain? Kelechi was quiet. She should have sent them anyway. Yes, she knows that. She knew it then. She just could not find the courage. Her shame was bigger than her love. At least, that is what she believed. Mama Eze told him the rest the way a surgeon opens something, cleanly, without hesitation, because the hesitation only prolongs the pain. She told him about a woman named Adaora, a woman from a neighboring village who had worked briefly as a trader and had met Kelechi's father, Damian Nadi, at a market in 1982. The relationship lasted 2 years, secret years. Mama Ngozi had not known. When Adaora became pregnant, Damian did not claim it. He told her to handle it. She did not handle it. She carried the pregnancy alone, quietly, far from anyone who knew her. And when the time came, the birth was complicated. She did not survive it. The child did. The child was Kelechi. Damian Nadi's family elders found out. There were meetings. There were voices raised and voices hushed. And in the end, the decision that was made was the kind of decision that men made in those days when they wanted to solve a problem without solving the problem. The child would be brought into the home. Mama Ngozi would raise him. It was her duty as a wife. Nobody asked Mama Ngozi what she thought. Nobody sat with her and said, this is going to be one of the hardest things you have ever been asked to do, and you are allowed to say that. They put the baby in her arms, and they told her it was her duty. And Damian Nadi looked at the floor, said nothing, defended nothing, just waited for it to be resolved. She tried. Mama Eze wanted Kelechi to know that. She tried. In the beginning, she held the baby. She fed him. She told herself that a child was a child, and it was not the baby's fault. But every time she looked at him, every time she looked at his face, she saw Damian's betrayal. She saw 2 years of her life that had been a lie. She saw her own humiliation, carried into her home and placed in her arms and called her duty. The love she was trying to build kept colliding with the wound. And the wound was older and stronger, so the wall went up, slowly, and then all at once. But here is what the wall hid. When Kelechi was 8 and the school fees were due, Damian said he had no money. Mama Ngozi went to the market and sold a pair of gold earrings her own mother had given her on her wedding day. She paid the school fees. She told no one. When Kelechi was 12, relatives from Damian's side came and said the boy was old enough to be sent to work for someone in Onitsha. They said it plainly, in the compound, as if they were discussing the price of yam. Mama Ngozi sat in the corner and said nothing for a long time. Then she said, that child is in my compound. He goes where I send him, not where you send him. He will finish school. The relatives left. Kelechi never knew this conversation had happened. He was in the next room, studying. When he was in secondary school and hunger was real, there were days when the pot was not enough. On those days, Mama Ngozi would serve everyone else first. Then she would stand at the fire and say she was not hungry. She would sit and drink water while everyone else ate, including Kelechi. He ate. She went without. He did not know. He was at university when she heard he had won an academic prize. A cousin who attended the same school mentioned it in passing. Over Christmas, Mama Ngozi did not react in the room, but that night she went to her room alone, and she sat at the small table by the window, and she wrote a letter. She wrote, "I heard what you did. I heard about the prize. I want you to know." She stopped. She folded the letter. She put it in an envelope. She addressed it to him. She held it for a long time. Then she put it in the box under her mattress, and she went to sleep. The letters accumulated, the way private things accumulate, one at a time, over years, without ceremony. The morning of his university graduation, she borrowed her neighbor's transport and made the journey to Lagos. She did not tell anyone she was going. She stood at the back of the crowd, outside the faculty, far from the families who had come with cameras and matching outfits and congratulatory banners. She was wearing a plain blue wrapper and a head tie she had ironed the night before. She watched him collect his degree, from a distance so great she could barely make out his face, but she knew his walk. She had watched him walk away from her enough times to know every particular of how he moved. She stood there and she cried without making a sound, the way women cry when they have decided they have no right to cry loudly. He did not look in her direction. She did not call his name. She turned and made her way back through the crowd and took the long journey home, and she wrote a letter that night. And she put it in the box, and she did not send it. Mama Eze left him with the box. She did not stay long after she finished speaking. She rose the way old women rise, with effort, and with a kind of dignity that makes the effort irrelevant. She was not a good mother to you. I will not stand here and tell you otherwise. What she did was wrong. A child should never carry an adult's wound. But she was also not the monster you had to believe she was, to survive her. I just wanted you to have the whole truth. What you do with it is your own. She picked up her walking stick. She left. The room felt different now. Not emptier. Fuller. Filled with truths that had waited decades to be spoken. For the first time in his life, Kelechi wasn't hearing his mother's silence. He was about to hear her voice. The door closed. Kelechi sat alone with the box. He spent that night reading. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He sat on the floor of his study, with the letters spread around him, reading each one by lamplight, in no particular order. She had written about everything. She wrote when she heard he had gotten a job. She wrote when the cousin mentioned he had bought a car. She wrote the night after the business magazine with his photograph was mentioned at a family gathering, and someone passed around their phone for everyone to look. She wrote, "I saw your face and I did not recognize you for a moment. You look like a man now, a full man. I do not know when that happened." She wrote about regret, the way people write about regret, when they have been living with it so long it has become ordinary, without drama, without asking for absolution. Just describing it, the way you describe the weather. In one letter, undated, she wrote, "There are days when I pass your old room, and I think about the way you used to sit on the step in the mornings. You never asked for much. You only ever asked me for one thing, and I could not give it to you. I have not forgiven myself for that. I do not expect you to forgive me either. I am only writing this so that at least somewhere, on paper, the truth exists." He read that one 3 times. Near the bottom of the box was a single envelope sealed differently from the others. By sunrise, he believed he had reached the end. Then he noticed one final envelope resting alone beneath the others. Different. Heavier. Waiting. Heavier. Thicker paper. Her handwriting on the front said, "His eyes only." He opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was different from the other letters. Smaller, slower, the hand of a woman who was ill and knew it. "My son, I have written to you many times, and I have never once sent the letters. You will wonder why. I wonder too, now that I am at the end of things and can see them more clearly. I think I was afraid, not of you, of the truth of what I had done. Every letter I wrote was also a confession, and I did not feel I deserved the relief of a confession without first paying something. I want to say this plainly, because I have spent my whole life being indirect, and it has cost too much. You were never the problem. My pain was the problem. I took what your father did to me, and I put it on your skin, and you were a child, and you had done nothing, and you deserved better than what I gave you. I cannot undo any of it. I have asked God about this many times, and I think the answer is simply that some damage cannot be undone. It can only be stopped. I want you to know what I did with the love I could not show you. I sold my mother's earrings for your school fees. I sent the relatives away when they wanted to take you to Onitsha. I went without eating on the days when the pot was not enough. I stood at the back of the crowd on the day you collected your degree, and I cried until my head tie was soaked, and I came home on the bus, and I wrote you a letter, and I put it in the box. I know this is not enough. I know that a child does not need a mother who loves him in secret. A child needs to be told. A child needs to be held. You needed those things, and I gave you the back of my hand, and the back of my head, and silence. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not even sure forgiveness is the right thing to ask for. I am only asking you to know this, before I am gone, so that the truth is somewhere outside of me. You were never the problem. I pray one day you will become the man I could never tell you I was proud of. Your mother. Even if I never showed it the way I should have. He had not cried in 17 years. Not when his first business collapsed and he had to borrow money to eat. Not when the mentor who believed in him had a stroke and died before he could show him what he'd built. Not on the nights when the Ikoyi house was so quiet that the silence had a texture, a weight, and he lay in a bed that was too large and looked at a ceiling that cost more than his entire childhood, and felt something he had no name for pressing against his ribs from the inside. He cried now. On the floor of his study, surrounded by her letters, with the last one in his hand. He cried the way men cry when they have held it for so long that the holding itself becomes the wound. Not gently, not quietly, the kind that takes over your whole body and shakes it. He cried for the boy on the step. He cried for the boy who stood alone at prize giving with a certificate and nobody beside him. He cried for the boy who pressed himself against the outdoor kitchen wall in the rain and waited to be remembered. He cried for the boy who asked a question and carried it for 30 years. And he cried for her. He did not expect that. But he cried for a woman who sold her dead mother's earrings for a child she could not look at without pain. Who stood at the back of a graduation crowd and watched from a distance she had built herself. Who wrote over 100 letters to a son she was too ashamed to send them to. Not because she was innocent. She was not innocent. Not because what she did was forgivable in the simple way people use that word, but because she was human, broken in a way that was done to her before she ever broke him, and unable to climb out of it, even when she could see it clearly. The tragedy was not that she was a monster. The tragedy was that she wasn't. He went back to the village the following week. He drove himself. No driver, no entourage, just him and the car, and the long road from Lagos into the southeast, through towns that got smaller as he went, until the road became the road he remembered, and the trees became the trees he had grown up beside. He did not stop at the family compound. He went straight to the burial ground. Her grave was simple. Red earth, a wooden cross, her name carved into the crossbar in letters that were not quite even. She had no gravestone yet. The money he'd sent had covered the burial, not the stone. He would order one. He would come back and place it himself. But first he needed to do this. He stood at her grave for a long time. Standing there, it felt as though time had folded in on itself. The lonely little boy who once sat on that doorstep, and the man who had returned home in a tailored suit, were finally no longer strangers to each other. One had spent a lifetime searching for an answer. The other finally understood it, long enough for the light to shift, long enough for the birds to change their sound, long enough for the feeling in his chest to move from something closed to something slowly opening. Then his knees found the ground. He was not a man who knelt easily. He was not a man who gave his body to grief in public. But there was nobody here except the trees. He pressed his hand flat against the red earth above where she lay, and the word came. Not rehearsed, not decided. It came the way things come when you have stopped fighting them. Mother. He stayed with his hand on the earth. The word hung in the air and then settled. You should have told me. All of it. You should have told me. He stopped, because he did not know what came after that sentence. He had been about to say, I would have understood, but he did not know if that was true. Maybe at 7 he would not have understood. Maybe at 15 he would have understood, and still burned with it. Maybe the wound would have been different, not smaller. He could not know. What he knew was this: she should have told him, not because it would have fixed everything, but because the silence had cost them both everything. He stayed until the light went orange and the ground turned cool. Then he stood up, brushed the red earth from his trousers, looked at her name on the cross. He said one more thing before he walked away. Rest. I'm going to make sure this stops with me. 6 months later, Kelechi Nadi registered a foundation. He named it the Ngozi Foundation, not to honor her memory without question, but because her name was where it all began. The wound and the love, the failure and the secret devotion, all of it started with her. And so the healing would carry her name, the way scars carry the shape of what made them. The foundation built support centers for children in homes where love was complicated, not absent entirely, because love is rarely entirely absent, but distorted, turned inward, weaponized by the people who were supposed to be safe. Children who sat on steps and asked questions in the quiet of their own chests. Children who learned to calculate the room before they entered it. Children who held certificates alone. Children who stood in the rain and were not called in. Those children. He built it for those children. On the day they opened the first center, a small girl, 6 years old, in a yellow dress, ran across the courtyard and grabbed his hand without asking. She did not say anything. She just held it and kept walking beside him, as if this were perfectly natural, as if he were simply hers and she were simply his, and that was that. He looked down at her, and he smiled. Not the controlled smile of a man managing a public moment. A real one. The kind that takes over your face before you can decide whether to allow it. The kind he had been waiting to give someone since he was 7 years old in a doorway. Unhealed pain does not stay where it was born. It travels. It finds the nearest child, and it begins again. Unless someone decides, unless one person, somewhere in the chain, looks at what was done to them and says, this ends with me. Forgiveness is not saying it was fine. Forgiveness is not pretending it did not happen. Forgiveness is not even a feeling. Forgiveness is a decision to stop being the next link in the chain, to take the wound that was given to you and refuse to pass it forward. To build, with the same hands that were never held, something that holds others. That is what Kelechi Nadi did. That is what it cost him. That is what it made him. If this story reached something in you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe. Turn on the bell. New stories every week.